Okay, it's running. Great. Hello. Hi. Welcome to my talk. My name is Nicholas Hellish. I'm a little bit about me. I'm a senior gameplay engineer at Warner Brothers, San Diego. Um, and pretty much I also have a cat. That's her. Um, here's a nice little picture of her where she's basically all cuddled up and sleeping. She's actually in my arms right now sleeping. So I have limited mobility right now in my arms where one arm is restricted by a cat. But this talk's pretty much going to be about uh, and I didn't know how else to phrase this, but it was basically like gameplay engineer designing for like live service games in Unreal because I didn't want to say gameplay engineering because it's not really specific to that, but it's like generally it is. But it also is like it's like a technical design sort of pattern that it's like at that point like it's kind of melding two different things. So I was like, I'm just gonna make it as complicated as possible in the naming, and hopefully that makes sense to people. So yeah, and my cat's name is Gatika, by the way. That's how you pronounce it, is Gatika. Before someone says Gattaca. No, it's Gatika. So yeah. So first, let's start off with what this talk's really going to be about, and it's intended for like gameplay engineers, but as a specific design pattern, as I said earlier. And it works well for live service games. It's applicable to non-live service games as well, and but it's generally just it's typically used for live service stuff in Unreal. And it's not specific to gameplay engineers, where it's like maybe you're like interested in programming or wanting to just learn more about these sort of things. I try to make it as digestible as possible. But yeah, this is generally geared towards gameplay engineers. And there is going to be some advanced topics discussed. It's going to include a lot of text in these slides, but it's generally just going to be like um, me just explaining it as like a high level overview kind of way. So if I start going into too much detail, you can always ask questions at the end. I'll be able to explain that stuff. Um, we're also going to lightly go over Unreal's asset management framework in this demo, which I also have a demo up and running. That's what I was spending time like. Give me a moment to get ready because I was waiting for that to boot up. Um, and the demonstration project's going to be available on GitHub for free. Obviously, it has to be, when it would be really weird to try and like have you guys pay for a demo project. That would be weird. Uh, but so it's so you can play with it. And yeah. So first, let's go over some nomenclature regarding this because a lot of people don't actually have the right nomenclature when they first start working on a live service game. So this sort of stuff is like just important to kind of get a baseline understanding of. So first, we're going to go over content and what that means. It basically means assets that are, and I included programmer on purpose because I'll explain why in a moment. There's programmer, designer, and artist-driven like content or assets. Um, in this case, for the programmer's content, because they're all categorized a little bit differently, but they kind of are interchangeable, if that makes sense. Where it's like a data asset, listing classes to spawn for a system, to function properly, that kind of stuff. It's basically just like the game works when I configure it this way, but I don't want to have to hard code it, you know? And then there's artist content, which is pretty obvious, like skeletal mesh, static mesh, textures, it's kind of obvious. Um, yeah, it can also go with like level design and level art. I want to specify there is a difference between the two. Um, and then there's designer content, which is like spreadsheet data, like character movement values, like speed, jump height, etc. Could also be like aggression or something like that for AI. It's like those those assets that just have a bunch of values in it, knobs and dials and stuff. And basically there's configuration data or, just data. And I actually used it earlier as we can see in the content. And they kind of work interchangeably with content. But it's very good to have an understanding of what a distinction is between them, which is there's configuration data and there's content. And configuration data, or we'll just call it data for now, are just assets that are intended to be convertible, like, to like Excel, JSON, different different string formats kind of thing because it's basically just a bunch of, specifically organized strings. That's how I kind of understand it. On explaining it to a person, like a human. Um, so another thing is they'll basically in Unreal they'll be in data tables, they'll be in data assets, config files, uh, and data objects are kind of like instanced at runtime kind of stuff, but like you'll set up a class and then put some variables and stuff like that in there, and then you instance it, and that's what gets used. Um, and then there's backend service. Backend service is really interesting where it is a remote server that holds like configuration data, player data, etc. And as I wrote it here, I'm kind of using these as my notes to help me as well with keeping track. It's kind of also known as like that backend as a service. Um, like literally that's what those kind of services sell themselves as. So like PlayFab, Amazon, GameSparks, or GameTech, they rename so much stuff at this point. I'm just like, whatever, I'm just gonna try to throw as many as I can with slashes. And Google Firebase, Epic's online services, Excel Byte, so forth. Like that's pretty much the idea is like these are backend as a service um, services, but basically we'll just call them backend service because no one wants to do backend as a service, humans. Um, and then finally, we're going to explain what front end is. Front end is basically the game application. It's applicable when we're using a backend service. So there's front end, which is, my game running on your machine. Then there's the backend service like PlayFab or something. So, and there's going to be a description of two types of games. There's the premium release type of game, which is, one-time purchase and you play the game, I buy the game at GameStop or something like that, or wherever your store is, Walmart or whatever, Target, I don't know. And there's an end of life cycle for when it gets updated or, changes happen and that sort of thing to it. There's major and minor patches and updates. There's major DLC releases with some minor ones thrown in there. Um, and then there's the live service game, which is actually a free to play or it's a one-time purchase to play it. And then there's also the subscription to play. So it's a variety of them. And the premium one's pretty simple. Uh, the premium one is what was kind of most of what every game was for the past like 30 to 40 years or so, or 50 years. And then, as the internet got bigger and bigger, and then the advent of like online gaming improved, live services became a thing. So it's intended to be as active as long as it is profitable. There are some games that have now been running over 10 years, which is wild to me that somehow they're still figuring out how to make new stuff for those games. At some point, I would consider just wanting to make some different thing, but that's me on my soapbox. I'll get off it. Uh, it also tends to work where there's seasons or, major expansions as like major DLC releases. And then they'll have like constant minor DLC release throughout those seasons or those like what's it called? Expansions. Because then they'll have like additional things that add on to it to keep players coming back, or they just do a single expansion, that's their whole thing. You know. And there's also obviously constant minor patches and updates. And premium releases for a long time also kind of had that, but then it's kind of been understood as like, okay, if they're constantly getting updates and patches, they're probably going to be considered live service. So first we're going to go over like how premium release games tend to be created. Um, at least like how they tend to function in the way that gameplay is oriented and how the data is organized and that sort of thing. So one of the ways, and I want to specify that this is not like, oh, we do these for everything and like this is happening in all of it. This is like a way that is used inside premium releases typically. So not everything is exclusively used, not everything is, being used in combination or whatever. It's always a hybrid approach. I'm just kind of listing out as much as I can. Um, but generally, there's one route, which is inheritance of gameplay objects. So this is usually for like quick and dirty games where it's rather small, where they just have a class that just has a bunch of variables as like its class defaults or something like that. And then, we throw in the level or something and we just adjust it in the level or something like that. It's very simple. Um, and usually we'll use structs as well to kind of hold that data so that way we can interchangeably hand it off to other objects so they can read it really quick. Um, then there's also the data tables route, which is basically just in Unreal, there's data tables which you can't change at runtime. And they have a key and value setup where it's a key is a string, and then the value is just like any struct that is usable with it. And you can also configure different data tables to use different structs, obviously. And then there's data assets, which are basically like a asset class that you configure as the schema, and then you throw on variables, structs, whatever, and then from there you can instance out that data asset as content assets. I know how confusing that sounds, but it makes, I'll show you in the demo project and it actually makes a lot more sense. But it instances it out as a content asset that you can't change the class anymore, but you can configure those values that you've set up in the schema. And it's very useful because it also works with Unreal's asset management framework in a really nice way, where you can just automate finding it. Another thing that you can also do with those that's really powerful with both data tables and data assets and gameplay objects is using instanced objects uh, as like unique configurations. So you can actually have a sort of configuration object that can be subclassed, you add variables to it, and then now those new variables can show up in the data asset or data table or whatever when you're selecting which instanced object to use. I know that was a lot of information I just said. May have sounded like a word soup. I hope that was clear to everyone, but it's a lot of information. Um, so the advantage of doing this is that, it's very quick to prototype and get quick changes in there, and like it's very quick to also get it used with gameplay code and stuff like that. And there's also some disadvantages to it. It doesn't apply to number two and three, but number one typically doesn't really scale well when working with large teams. Because you're using a lot of hard-coded values in a gameplay object that's having to be instanced, and it's like there's just so much upkeep in management with that it's just a headache to deal with. And you also in Unreal, because of the UAsset stuff being binary files, it's a nightmare to deal with merge conflicts and version control through it. And then this one is specific to number one. It can cause unintentional downstream effects where if you change the inheritance like parent, it propagates down to the children sometimes, depending on how you've set up your frameworks. And it can cause unintended, effects and can cause bugs and that sort of thing. So that's why number one kind of is that one where it's got a few disadvantages. Uh, and this is across all three of them. You do have to manually push title updates to platforms for small changes. And the reason why is because like if you release your game and then you make a change to a data asset, that is still a cooked out on disk asset that needs to be recooked and then sent to the recooked and packaged and then resent out to the platform holders so they can go through certification and then you can have the update be sent out to the players. And it's very slow, it's very methodical, and it's very much like you cannot get small changes in there. So you end up having to batch a bunch of changes at once. And it kind of slows your momentum of the project. And this doesn't apply to number three, but you end up having to hard code a lot of stuff where it's not being content or data driven, but it's like a mix of it, which isn't fun. So in the case of like data tables and number one with the inheritance stuff, you end up having to, as I said, you throw things in the level and you have to specifically tell it you're using this object and make a new like gameplay object or something as the configuration, or you have to make a new data table, and it ends up bloating the project with a lot of unneeded like data, when you can just kind of organize it better. So then there's live services. Live service games typically will use the backend service uh, as basically just a giant storage facility for holding that configuration data. And that configuration data can be like player data, items, different things. Like it can also do extra stuff like doing seasons and that sort of fun stuff. And what happens is the front end will retrieve those values from the back end, and then they'll just convert it into, they'll be retrieved as a string or usually a JSON, or depending on how your backend wants to do it. If they want to do a different format, you work with it. But basically, those are the two common ones where it's a JSON string. And then from there, you end up having to parse it on the front end to get the values. So like it'll give you a JSON of like, player config and its jump height is 5. And it's like, okay, what do I know? I have to know that jump height is a float. That's what I want to parse it into. Otherwise, I have no idea. So the advantage of this is it's great for pushing small changes without title updates because it's just a JSON string you can pull via an internet connection. So, you don't have to make a small change in your data asset, cook, package the project, send it to platform holders, and then they don't have to go through certification. It's just, oh, I made a change on the internet. It just propagate, the client's gonna just pull that information into their machine anyway, the player. So there's no real on-disk asset changes. It's just pulling from the back end. And it scales really well for large teams and large content-driven teams because, it's just all data that's being driven by the backend service, not by what's on your machine. And it's very strictly data only. So it's very aggressively like I don't want to have my on-disk stuff break because, things on the back end should be configured correctly, and it's very quick to make those changes. But the disadvantage of this is pretty much like it takes a lot of time and effort to set up that stuff with the back end, and you have to have that knowledge as well. So that's an important thing that it requires, wisdom to know like, do we have the time and effort to do this, or is it something where we may have to treat it as a premium game route until we get a big enough team to start building, the tech for live services? But, there's also like already set up ones like PlayFab and that sort of stuff. So, you got to research into that stuff. And you also end up having to handle edge cases of if you want to support offline play, well, what if the backend disconnects? But we still want them to keep playing. It's like we have to set up, frameworks, and then you end up building like two games essentially. And it's very slow for prototyping and requires a lot of pre-planning because as I said earlier, like you have to know that this is going to be like a float value or it's a string value or it's pointing to a asset path for like a texture to load or something like that. So it makes like mapping content a nightmare and kind of setting up, things for designers to prototype new things kind of a nightmare unless you build out like a bunch of back-end frameworks and tools for this. And at that point, it's like the game engine is really just a screen that renders the back end for you. So then I want to provide you with the meat of this talk, which is the data assets with backend services route. And the reason why I say data assets is mainly because data assets will be driving the gameplay in this case. They would basically be the middleman between the game's front end and the back end. So they would be updated by the backend essentially. So it's that thing of like you have the backend framework, and then it sends the data to the front end and sends it directly to that data asset. And then from there, the gameplay would read from that data asset. So you automatically are supporting like Unreal's asset management framework if you're using primary data assets, which is really useful because they use strings as literally just like, the asset ID to quickly look up and search these items. One second, drink. Okay. So another thing that you can also do with this is that you can use instance objects to kind of assist with like unique configuration of these primary assets and like data assets and that sort of thing. So then from there, the content is it's kind of being driven like in the content browser, but also being driven by the backend, if that makes sense. And the advantage of this is it's still great for pushing small changes without title updates because, it's basically the backend is still being treated as the source of truth for data, and then it sends it, to your front end. And then at that point, like it scales really well because you're using data assets, you're using a combination of both your on-disk stuff and your backend framework. and it's strictly data driven, but it allows for some flexibility because you're doing a hybrid approach, which are always usually the best. And it also handles the edge case of when the backend framework, disconnects or you want to play offline mode, with no internet connection, whatever, it allows you to kind of support that easy. And it's also great for prototyping because they just create a new data asset, connect it with your gameplay code, boom, there you go. And then you do a little bit of work with connecting it to the backend. But if you've already set up a very flexible framework with that, it'll just automatically connect with it, you know. But the disadvantages of doing this is again, you still have to spend some time setting up the backend. But, you know, that's about it. Like that's in terms of the disadvantages of it. Like there's too many advantages to not want to look at this and take it as a viable option. So I'm going to explain an ideal scenario of data assets with the backend service in like a more literal sense on how you would kind of build that out from like a high level overview. Thank you, Gatika. I don't know if anyone heard her meowing. Yeah. So data assets would be in this scenario created on disk, in the Unreal project. You would go in your content browser, right click, new data asset or whatever. And then the data assets would be converted into a specifically structured JSON to send to the backend. Okay. And when I say this, it would be the case of you would have to kind of build out some functionality of scraping through the data assets properties and then create the JSON from there. And you can do that automatically in Unreal, which is fantastic because of the U property stuff. And as I just said, you would pretty much have to make a tool to handle this. You would have to make a tool for formatting it, and there's more work involved with the version control handling and such like that. And the tool would also handle like pushing and pulling those JSONs to and from the backend service. So you're kind of treating it like, okay, I've created the data asset. Now I'm going to open this tool and have it kind of handle sending this information to and from the backend to kind of link this stuff up so that way it's always up to date with what the backend has. So that way if some on someone else's machine they're like, "Oh, I need to get your changes that you just pushed up to the backend." You just open the tool, pull it in, and it forcibly changes your local data assets. Um, and obviously, like using version control to like push those data asset changes also helps. But this is good for like sending up information changes to players without having to cook out new things or anything like that because the properties already exist, on the data asset and they're sent to the backend. And I know that just brought up a ton of questions to someone probably, so I know we'll get to that near the end of the talk at the Q&A hopefully. So, and I'm just kind of rushing because we're nearly getting to the 30-minute mark, and I want to hopefully open the project by then. So then there's the backend service. The backend service in this scenario would be using a key and value design that kind of layers on top of itself for like items and player data. And in this case, like the backend items themselves, their job is to basically be linked up with your on-disk data assets on what they have. So there would be the key, which is the item ID. And I want to specify this for everyone in terms of whenever you're doing item ID stuff or whatever. Um, it's always good if you're not having something that's configurable or designer driven, and when I say designer driven, it's like if you can open it and right click and rename and that sort of thing for an ID, I would highly suggest you do that. 1 second, my cat. I know, cat, you want to be a part of the talk. Um, but basically, it's always good to just use integers. It's basically meant to be a unique non-player facing value, like an integer or something. And an example of this being done wrong is in Steam. Where the account IDs are literal strings, so you can't really change them you can't really change your account ID, you can change your display name, but your account ID is a literal string of what you created your account with, which, you may be thinking like, oh, that's a good idea. It's like, well, at a certain point, like, if someone else has the same name, you end up having to make a new one rather than just, use an integer and then you both can have the same name as a display name. Um, so yeah, just wanted to point that out. So the value of this item would actually be a tuple, and the tuple would be first a key of the data assets like on disk reference, so like pointing to this asset on disk. And this is primarily for your tooling, so that way you can kind of link this stuff up on disk. And you would use like a primary asset ID. Do not use asset paths, okay? I just want to emphasize this. Do not use asset paths for your for like keys and stuff like that because those can change. You can move it into another folder and then you have to deal with fixing it up just because you moved it. It's like that there's no point in that. It should just be like a string ID that you can look up easily. And when I say so the primary asset ID or something in quotation or in parentheses, that's using Unreal's asset framework where it's extremely flexible and extremely powerful for that. And then the value of this item would the other value of this item would be the JSON or of the data asset that got converted over. So then we have player data. And player data would basically be, it's a lot simpler where it could be a key of multiple items or something like that. And this is just kind of like, it's up to you on how you want to configure this, but it's basically like following that same pattern of like a key value system in the backend to consider the types. And then from there, you would have the value be just the item ID. So that way it links up to the other item. And now you're seeing what I mean about like layers on top of itself for an item and player data kind of stuff. So demo time. Oh, great. 2 minutes before the 30-minute mark. Great. But yeah, before we start on the demo, I want to bring up a disclaimer. At the time of this presentation, I ran out of time with setting up the project, so it's not fully set up, but I do have a checklist of remaining parts that I'm going to update over time in the README of the GitHub repo. Um, so yeah, uh, it's not set up with the backend framework as well because of time and work required, and I only had a week, and the reason why I only had a week was because of travel and stuff like that, so I was a bit preoccupied, but I will be getting this updated at some point. And just to let you know, like what this project has right now is data assets driving the gameplay using instance objects. Uh, so that way you at least have some sort of example of the framework I'm talking about, at least, in the project. So I'm gonna get that open, move that over here. Okay. So this is using the third person template, not first person. I don't know how to read, I swear. Or I do, yeah. So basically, I want to explain this. These are two triggers. These will give you abilities. And when I say abilities, they're just literally simple objects that just are handlers. Um, and they point to ability IDs. So these are data assets. So this one will give you a ragdoll ability. This one will give you an explode ability. Okay, and I can open this drop down and select from multiple. So like right here, dash ability, explode, jump, ragdoll. Um, so yeah, at this point, if anyone has questions and stuff like that regarding the project at the moment, I can answer it if you just want to type it in the chat or if someone wants to say anything. This is a little bit more of the peanut gallery, like can talk with me while I'm doing stuff and kind of demoing stuff for you guys. Um, while that's happening of questions or anything, I'm going to play an editor and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So right now I have no ability. Oh wait, I apologize. I just realized I forgot to hook something up. So I will push that change momentarily. Uh, Live demos, they're fun, right? Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly grab this, set text, grab you, get text. Oh, get display name. There it is. This is something I configured earlier. Just forgot to hook that up. And yeah, so right now I have the dash ability. And if I hit E on my keyboard, I will dash, but it won't do it while I'm on the ground. Okay, so I'm tapping the dash button. Also, I want to call this out. My jump is actually an ability as well. So, and if I open the content browser, you can see all these data assets. So I have one data asset for my player, and this is the default startup abilities. So I have a dash ability automatically. I can also give myself an explode ability by default. And this is my jump. It's really just tied to my spacebar. So I can have the dash actually be that. And if I hit play, I hit E, I do an explode. Okay. And as you saw, it was actually loading the textures and stuff, but the particle system was still playing. which is cool because it was literally loading it. So I'm pressing the space bar, I can't do anything, and then I press space bar and I dash only when I'm in the air. So let me close this. Let's put this back to jump because I like being able to jump. I can actually map the jump ability to my E key as well. So let me actually just go back here. So yeah, if I hit E, I jump, I jump, I jump, and then I jump. I press jump on my spacebar, I can jump as well. I probably should have just shown my keyboard in the recording, but you know what? We'll go over that in a minute. Here, let's show ragdoll just so you can see. Actually, let's clear this stuff and see it get changed at runtime. So I'm gonna grab the ragdoll ability and I'm gonna jump ragdoll. Yeah. So yep, that sounds about right. So as you can tell, it's not perfect right now, but um, so right now I don't have any abilities here. So I'm actually going to open up one of these abilities. Let's open up the explode one. That one's pretty simple. So I have a little texture. I just grabbed it from the engine assets, and I have a text for display name. And this is regarding loading and stuff like that. So this is using the instance objects where I can configure out my ability explode. So if I wanted to do, let's say, I should have just grabbed a different particle system, but still, uh, I can configure where the FX like offset is in relative space. So I can change it to be like, actually, I can do this at runtime, by the way, which is really fun because when you use data assets, you can change them while the game is running. So it's great for prototyping as well. So I'm gonna actually I'm gonna grab the explode ability. So I hit E, does the explode. Okay, gonna open this guy up and I'm going to let's see. Um, Debugging now. Let's actually change this. So let's say 200 units forward. Okay, and we're going to open this guy back up and I hit E, and now it's 200 units forward. So, and the game is still running, by the way. I didn't stop playing or anything. Just yeah. So if I change this back and open this back up, yeah, yeah. And that's the really powerful thing about using data assets and stuff. Now, here's the really fun one is if I go back to here, because I'm using instanced objects, I call them ability configs in this project. But while the game is running, I can actually change it to be dash now because I set them up to be using these configs. So now I haven't actually stopped playing, by the way. So I can I can jump and now I'm dashing, even though it says explode. So I literally just changed my ability at runtime, you know. And that's the really powerful thing about using these instance objects and data assets and stuff, is you can change it at runtime. So when you hook it up with the backend framework, it's like you kind of become invincible in what you can make. Um, Let me actually change it to ragdoll. Let's do that. We'll end this plain editor session by ragdolling. Eh, look at that. So yeah, now I'm going to stop playing. Yep. And I'm going to set this back to explode because I really didn't change anything. I've also set up the default values here. So, oh yeah, I can set up an explosive dash. Yeah. Uh, me. Well, actually, I don't have enough keybinds. Sorry. I can only do two at once. So we want to do dash, and let's do explode. And I set them up as arrays so that way you guys can, when you get the project, you can play with it and break it apart. That was on purpose that I set it up as an array. All right, so I'm gonna go over here. Yeah, see? And that's the thing is like it's very it's very flexible because of that. Oh, whoops. Let me open that back up. There we go. We can actually go into creating one right now if anyone's interested. So to let you all know, it's in the blueprints folder. Configurations is what I'm calling it. And then abilities. Uh, these are some other things that I was setting up. So don't worry about that. Actually, these ones, these is regarding health and speed, where I want to be able to change the like parameters of how fast the character moves and everything at runtime. Um, so let's create a new one. Uh, yeah, data tables are not able to be changed at runtime. So let's do, oh wait, what am I doing? Blueprint, yeah. And this is config, yeah, ability configuration. And we're going to do ability dash or underscore. I didn't think ahead, so I don't know what what to make the new ability. Any suggestions from the peanut gallery? That's simple that I can do in like a minute, hopefully. Waiting for, oh no, autosave, how dare you? I'm gonna turn that off. Sorry, I'm one of those people that just turns off autosave automatically when they open a create a project. Oh, force push? Yeah, let's do force push. Force push will be fun. Force push. And then I think we have some, yeah, let's, oh yeah, yeah, we have some physics objects. So the way this is set up is handle configuration, then ability use. Configuration will run first, and then ability use runs. Yeah. So, ability use, we're going to get the camera. Um, yeah, let's get the camera, and then we're going to get the forward vector times. I'm going to be probably making people just at me, get mad at me if I if I do fun stuff like this. Let's do 1,000 unit. Actually, no. Sorry, I just realized I'm being dumb about this. Let's do force push range. So this will be our configuration that's going to show up in the data asset, by the way. So that's going to be fun. I'm just going to set this to true. We'll just assume that it's always going to work. Nothing can break in this demo. Nothing. So there's that. We're going to do box trace because I'm lazy. Um, for objects, object types, file. Yeah, yeah, you can complain all you want. Physics body. There we go. Orientation. Let's do get character, get actor rotation. Sorry, I really should have set this up ahead of time for you guys. I'm sorry. Forward vector, yeah. And then get actor location plus and let's do um, push size. Change this to a float. Yeah, I don't care. Boom, boom. Beautiful blueprints, right? I know. Thank you. Array, grab the character, ignore the character. We don't want to hit him. Uh, select. I also set up a debug mode for these objects. Oop. Let's try. Is debugging? Yeah, there it is. Plug that in there. If it is duration, so we can debug the size at least. And I can turn on the debug mode at runtime, which is really fun. So we'll see that in a moment so we can test. Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll buff out. Let's do this. And then branch. If we hit anything. Oh wait, multi-box trait. Multi-box trait. But no, it's not. It's only gonna hit physics. Yeah, phys bodies, so we're good there. Break. Hit component. Add impulse. And then we're gonna just do this again. Because I'm being lazy about this. And times. Let's do float. Force push strength. Uh, let's just add this, saving time, velocity change. Yep. All right. And then now we have our beautiful code written out where it just adds force. I'm gonna do this, just make it a little bit easier to stomach. This is beautiful code. Absolutely beautiful. You know, it's art, as they say. There we go. At least something cleaner. Cleaner. All right, so next. All right, so now we have our functionality. We're now going to create our data asset. So I'm just gonna right click. Where is it? Gameplay? No, miscellaneous. Data asset. And I'm gonna type in ability. Okay, let's try this again. Character. There it is, character abilities. I should probably just show that, add a keyword thing to it so that way it shows up there. DA underscore force push ability. And let's it's a good texture. Yeah, this one. Yeah. All right. Force push yo, and we're gonna set this up. So force push. That's the object that's gonna handle it. And completely forgot to say. Oh yeah. So if you ever want to know how to set up the class defaults with the instance object, you just set it up in the object itself. So in this case, we're gonna do Um, force push range is already set up. Size, let's do 300. Okay, I'm going to turn on debugging by, actually, no, I'll just leave that off. Okay, and as you can see, it already updated with it. So the default value has been set for it. Let's set this up to 15,000. Okay, and I'm going to turn on debugging for it. And in the character, I'm going to now use force push. Save. Live demos are always fun, aren't they? Let me press E, so that's the box trigger. Okay, great. Yeah, it hit something. Look, look at that guy go. Look at that box. Look at that box go. Oh wait, actually, let me do that again. So I hit E. Now it's showing it. It's doing the debug trace. I'm gonna go in here and just turn this off, and I'm going to open back up this guy, and I'm hitting E. See? Look at that go. No debug stuff. Here, let's actually shorten this to 500 and let's crank this bad boy up. Okay, let's open that back up. And now, boom, it's gone. It's been destroyed. It's been eliminated. No, it just got launched away. Yep. I'm breaking the game now. Let's lower that down a little bit. Yeah. Let's actually do 50,000. Sorry, I should have done that at runtime. That would have been more fun. Look at that go. Yeah. And that's, yeah, no, see, that's the thing. That's the beautiful thing about using data assets with instance objects. And then, like, when you add in the live service aspect of connecting this with the backend servers and backend framework, like, you kind of just are able to make new functionality literally, like, within a day and push it out to players without actually having to deal with content, without it actually being considered platform, like, changes or anything because it's just, it's just configuration data. Like at the end of the day, this is pointing to just the class itself, as you can see right there. And that's the actual path that it has. And then these are the configuration values. And then it just scrapes through and builds that, list of values. You can put in a JSON, send it off, and then you pull it, and then you can forcibly change it at runtime. And because it's a data asset and it's on disk, you can automatically just deal with the replication of it automatically, where if you set it to a specific data asset, it's going to just find it on the other person's machine because of how Unreal replicates data assets automatically. So then you don't even have to worry about like, oh, does the client have this data asset, on their machine or something like that. If they just are updated to the current version, they will have that data asset on their machine and it'll be replicated. And I apologize if my audio is really loud. I'm noticing the microphone is like getting to the red point a few times. So I think that's kind of it for my presentation. If anyone has any questions. Oh, actually, here's another part of the presentation, is this health one. So, yeah, stably named objects for the win. Yeah, if anyone went to Wizard Cell's talk the other day, yeah, shameless plug. Um, come to NotGDC. Yeah, where we just build on top of each other's talks. No, it's like it's extremely important. Um, this player health one is pretty much like a multiplier thing where if I apply damage to a health component on the character, uh, then it will first check this data asset and see, okay, should I multiply that damage by this value if it is a damage type? And the damage type stuff is something that I just kind of quickly threw in there that's relating to something that Unreal set up or Epic set up, where it's a class object that holds information. I don't use any of this. I literally just use the class itself, but you could just use gameplay tags at this point if you wanted to. And gameplay tags would cover the same thing, but I just wanted to show this as an example. So, gameplay tags are fantastic, by the way. I highly recommend them. I will probably just add that to the project and replace these damage types to that. So, yeah. That would be pretty much the end of the talk. I'm glad I was able to get this in a timely manner. So if there's any questions or anything like that, I'm going to open it up to the floor of QA. Oh, I forgot to here. Let me switch back to this. Boom. Thanks for listening to my ranting. Sweet. I'm glad this was helpful. Do you have any okay, Omida has a question. Do you have any methods that do you uh do you have any methods do you like for linking a data asset to the backend? Yeah. So that's the thing I was saying earlier with primary data assets, and I can show you in the C++ actually. Let me get project over here. There's Rider. If everyone's a fan of Rider, right? It's way better than Visual Studio. Um, so here's the thing about data assets is they have this function in there called get primary asset ID. And the primary asset ID is something that you can override and then you can build it out yourself of how you want to set that up. You can set it up to just be the name of the asset itself in the content browser, or you can just use the Unreal default version. And basically that's what I would suggest using for linking it because the asset ID is just a string. It's really just an F name. So you can easily tell the asset manager, I want this primary asset ID. And then, from there it will handle finding it and loading it. And then you have your primary asset on disk. So you can send that to the backend and that's your linkage, essentially. But if there's the case of like the asset manager literally cannot even find this asset ID, and that's what you use the tool for, uh, that's when you would say, okay, well, there's a conflict here. In the tool, it's telling me I can't find this, so you need to link this up and tell me which one is the correct one. And then you would have to manually obviously fix it, but it's like that's linking up the assets themselves rather than the properties. And if you want to see how I scrape through the properties in this project, which is already set up, fun times in my code base. Yeah. So uh, basically what I'll do is I'll override this asset bundle data function, which is where it gets like the asset bundles to load. Um, Forgot to even follow my own conventions. Oh, I'm sorry. Man, interface. And this is just a signal like I'm inheriting from this class or whatever, or overriding this. Um, Okay, so first let me finish Omid. So pretty much what I'm doing here is like because the data asset's handling scraping through for metadata, I'm overriding it, telling it here's my bundles. I'm overriding to get it from instance objects, and then I'm sending that to the asset manager. And the asset manager is a singleton that you can just kind of use for getting primary assets. And then it leads to this function, which I override in character abilities. Okay. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm calling a function that I set up already in the base class called collect soft paths from blueprints. And I'll just go through all my ability configs and scrape through them. So in here, it leads to another class, and leads to another class. It's a recursive function, which is always fun. And basically what I'm doing in here is, yeah, this is the part where I'm scraping through each of the properties in the instance object. And if it sees a soft class, or soft object, or struct, and then it recursively goes into the struct to find those same things, uh, or an object and does the same thing, then it will just kind of collect all the soft paths and everything, and then at the very end, add it to the resulted like asset bundle. All right, so regarding Wizard Cell's question, I know data assets are too powerful, but would you still consider using data tables? And if yes, when? I would use data tables as content inside those like data assets or inside the instance objects, because then you can link it with asset bundles. And I'll show you about the asset bundles in a moment. Let me see. Let's see, where is it? Nope, that's not it. I also kind of did an override and told it like don't look for anything with the asset bundles thing inside those instance objects. So that way it just kind of collects all of the soft paths, regardless of if it has meta tag, because it accounts for blueprint stuff, which you can't really add that to. But an example of soft path of asset bundles like here. So um, this would be something that you would also use with like a T soft object pointer of a U data table, and then you would just use the asset bundles with that. But honestly, it should be like data tables should be a component of data assets, not the other way around where you have a list of a data table listing data assets, because that's what the asset manager is for. It literally does this job for you of finding all the primary data assets. Um, and I just want to call this out also in the data asset for setting that up with the asset manager. You would go into the project settings, you would go to asset manager, and you would go to primary assets types to scan. Okay, and you would open this up and you would make a new entry. So by default, it has these two, map and primary asset label. And you would add the name of this type, and then you would add the base class. And the way that Unreal by default has set it up is it uses the same exact name as the class. So that's why I have it like that, is like this sort of stuff. So, and then I also, as an optimization, I set up their directories, but you can also literally tell it like um, scrape through the game folder, and then it just finds in every folder that's in the project. Um, so yeah. And then you may be wondering about the modular game feature system. That is actually something that is separate because you can only look inside of the game folder. And I'll show you in a sec. See? Oh, you can actually go into the engine. Never mind. I was totally wrong on that. I apologize. That means you can add into this, but game features is kind of meant to handle not having to manually add it into the project settings here, because like that's what the game feature is meant to handle, essentially. Yeah, also, and just kind of going back to the chat, um, okay, yeah. Um, yeah, Wizard Cell is asking, game features is what Epic added in UE5, right? The DLC kind of thing? Yes, it's in Lyra, if you want an example of it. They go kind of ham on that one, and when I say ham, I mean they like did a fantastic job on it. Um, Basically, it's the thing of like you create, yeah, yeah, the Lyra plugin or Lyra emote. But basically, it's a system in the engine now that will treat certain plugin. It's where you create like your sections of the game in a plugin, and then you put it under the game features folder in the plugins folder, and it will automatically find those game features and handle loading it, um, and activating it as well. because there's a different process between like loading it and then like you're now using it kind of thing, because you could preload it. It does not handle replication in multiplayer. So it's the case of like you need to obviously handle the replication of like I want to activate this game feature and then send it across the network like, hey, activate this game feature. It's only local, which makes sense. It's dealing with your assets on your machine. You don't, there's no reason to try and account for like someone else's machine, when its whole job is just to deal with asset loading and management of it. And it actually uses data assets in this case. So here I can actually pull up that that function again in case anyone wants to just kind of peek at it. Yeah, lesson learned, use data assets. It's honestly the way to make games essentially in Unreal that I recommend because you kind of data ties all your functionality. And I want to also call out that the way I set it up in this project with like the instanced objects and everything, that was me kind of rushing and just trying to build out something to showcase it, but your project can do it however you want. Okay, you can set up an array, you can use a single one, you can set up like a pair of them, you can put them in a struct even. And I actually am now going to show that off because I set that up in the project. If anyone wants to know how I set up it to be instanced, this is how. This is the object, and I added these uClass tags to it, and then everything else just kind of inherits from that. And then I added a struct as well as a container to kind of instance those, and that's pretty much it. Um, and let me show you an example in C++. This is all I did regarding inheritance. That's it. Everything else is just specific to the ability configuration, including the get world stuff. Like it is specific to this guy. So let me show you. So I'm going to, I can actually, no, wait, no, I have to do it in here. Um, what was it? Oh, right, wrong one. Let me just do an example. And configuration. Yeah, not GDC configuration container. And I'm going to compile, right? And then boom, I can have an instanced object in here. And here's the really fun one because I added it to a ability force push. Let's go to the ability. And you can even nest them inside each other. That's right. You can deeply nest them and just keep adding them until someone says stop. Force push. I'm just gonna keep doing it until someone says stop. Okay. But yeah. So that's kind of the fun thing is like, and this might actually crash my editor. I don't know. Let's see. Nope, cleared it. Yep. Nice and easy. But yeah, no, it's really simple stuff that like it isn't well known throughout the Unreal Engine community. But yeah, that is my talk. Thank you all for attending and listening to me rant. If you want to talk more, we can talk more in the yeah, no crash, right? We can talk more in the garden, I think it was. What is the channel that I'm supposed to be talking or chat? Um, Oh yeah, live talks or garden. Yeah. But yeah, so thank you all very much.